Yeah. This is the story of the Disinherited. One time. Yeah, I was born in a different time in the same place where 9 kids escorted to school cause of their race. Yeah, they spit on Elizabeth. 36 years later, I'm in the thick of this. Same spot before Game of Thrones, my whole hood was on HBO. Now in case we know, something more than what the TV show. It don't matter, they won't let you grow. I'm a son of the rock, what a hard place. I was charged with trying to bring us up, oh what a hard case. Ride I-630 and see the skyline. An obituary in the Gazette byline. This ain't a story for the faint-hearted. Really, I was lost before I ever started. Yeah. I probably should have been a drug dealer. I grew up in the hood with some stone killers. My grandmama was a house cleaner. My daddy died from the cocaine. Yeah. That's after he was slanging cane. Right about the time when the crack came, hood nearly died under Reaganomics. I ain't being part of son, I'm just being honest. Ever been a part of something so sick and dishonest? The hood is just a rock solid broken promise. And the project was a science fair. Let's put them all together, see who dying there. I'm thankful that we made it out alive. My mama's the only reason we survived. Now I gotta give a shout to Tuskegee. Tell me how many ways can you tell us that you don't need me? And some of y'all still don't believe me. And some of y'all still think it's easy. Say pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But we barefoot, where our boots at? Still waiting on my freedom papers. Still waiting on my 40 acres. Oh yeah, and what about the mule? Everything you taught us is always has been cruel. My Uncle Glenn held me down, no. Taught me how to work and pull myself around, no. No thanks to my dad. Sometimes I wonder if pain is all he had. Lifetime of sins, are they forgiven? Had to wonder if life was worth living. Getting stuck in the mud, I'm still driven. 3 kids, the reason I'm still living. How to focus on reading and mathematics when I step through the carnage of tweakers and crack addicts. The American dreams, we ain't get our crack at it. Fell off after Obama, we back at it. Trying to breathe, we asthmatic. I keep the pain in the corner, my mind's at it. Every once in a while, I can't think. Get discouraged and then I holler at Frank. Yeah, I see you, Mr. Mayor. Can't control the game unless you a player. Must control the shame in many layers. Sometimes our hopes and dreams seem to betray us. Sometimes we gotta open the door for the next man. Also the women ain't trying to make you feel less than. The homie Pete was my classmate. Freshman year, Yoakum Hall, that's my roommate. Didn't see it coming around the corner. His mama died and soon he was a goner. Depression got him caught up in addiction. Couldn't manage the pain, it's an affliction. It's an admission, black man's revival. I'm a product of black man's survival. Came and left, still waiting on my arrival. Learn the man in the mirror is not my rival. R.I.P. to MJ. Another black king gone from his pain. Even the greatest of his day was no match for the demon in his way. I'm still chasing my thriller. As the pressure of living gets more realer. Trayvon and Emmett are kindred, they one spirit. We like George, we holler, they don't hear it. Rodney King was beaten, they still acquitted. We say Black Lives Matter, they say quit it. The disinherited missive has been submitted. And we'll never give up until it's finished. My father was a casualty of war. And I was almost a sequel to Encore. Thank God bringing me focus. Davis, Ella, and Anna just take notice. I raised y'all to be superior. I apologize to you, Olivia. How could I love someone else when I never had true love for myself? Yeah, I gotta speak my truth until I'm gone and bequeath my youth. Used to be a lost cause, ain't no repairing me. Every conscious black man should be in therapy. God, he took care of me. When I was down in that basement, he was aware of me. Self-pity is a sin. I say again, self-pity is a sin. Life knocked me down, I'm back up. No matter if I cry, I'm still tough. No matter if I die, I'm still loved. And since the day I was born, I've been touched. This is the story of the disinherited. The story of the disinherited.
Powerful. I want to thank everyone, first off, for joining us this evening for the audiobook release of The Joy of the Disinherited by Kevin Dedner, by Dr. Jeff Flanagan, aka Giovanni on the track. So I want to first just thank you all for joining us. We're happy to announce the release of the audiobook and to have a critical conversation about grief during the holiday season. I have the pleasure of serving as a moderator. My name is Dantavius Hicks. I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Maryland. I currently serve as a full-time therapist and a research associate for Hurdle Health. And I am joined by Dr. Jeff Giovanni Flanagan, man of many hats. He is currently the principal of George Junior High School in Springsdale, Arkansas. The Magnolia, Arkansas native, in 1995 Magnolia High School undergraduate, and a 1999 BSc graduate of the University of Arkansas. Is married to Coraline Flanagan, and they are proud parents to three daughters, Tia, 29, Emira, 20, and Elise, 19, and three sons, two 20-year-old twins, Jaden and Jordan, and Jackson, 9 years old. Jeff holds a master's degree in teaching and educational leadership, and on December 13, 2014, he received his doctorate in higher education administration, P through 12, from Harding University. And Jeff is a former Division I college women's basketball coach at Southern Arkansas University and the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. As if all of the above are not enough to keep him busy, he is also a national recording artist, recording under the stage name Giovanni. Credit to the track that we just heard related to the release of The Joy of the Disinherited. We're also joined by the author of The Joy of the Disinherited, Mr. Kevin Dedner. He serves as the founder and CEO of Hurdle Health. Hurdle is a mental health care platform for invisible barriers. And as a leading culturally intentional mental health provider, Hurdle provides a comprehensive suite of mental health services and self-mastery tools for employers and payers to meet their employees and members' needs. As an award-winning public speaker, Kevin brings over 15 years of experience in public health, working on political campaigns and leading health policy wins in the areas of childhood obesity, HIV/AIDS, tobacco control, working in political campaigns, and also leading health policy wins. He has led strategic planning processes on behalf of several clients, including the nation's largest public health foundation, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Kevin is a graduate of the University of Arkansas with a degree in public science and holds a master's degree of public health from Benedict University. He's a frequent speaker in health and health technology conferences and has self-published a number of essays that document his work in public health and mental health care. The Joy of the Disinherited is his debut book, and today we are celebrating the audiobook release narrated by Dr. Jeff Flanagan. I just want to open up with first saying, I read somewhere, Kevin, that you were nervous that someone would not have the level of passion to narrate the book with as much intensity, vulnerability, and like you said, passion as you would do yourself. I think it's safe to say, hearing the audiobook and now the official release, that Dr. Jeff delivered. Certainly delivered. He captured the book, captured the intensity, content in the book, and certainly brings the words to life in the audiobook release. Dr. Jeff, my first question in the conversation is directed to you. Can you talk a little bit about the connection to the book and what helped you bring the life that you did to narrating Kevin's
I
debut book.
appreciate it. Yeah, I think first of all, the connection is that's my brother, you know, and supporting him. You know, I was gonna buy it hard. I got it hardcover. I got it, you know, the hardback joint. I got the paperback. You know, if he put it out on Blu-ray, I was gonna get that. You know, so I mean, that's my brother, and so that was the first connection. We were roommates, we frat brothers, and but the story, um, I couldn't put it down, and I was speed reading it while he was doing a book talk here at the University of Arkansas, and we just had a conversation. I was like, hey man, if you decide to do an audiobook, you know, I'd love to be able to narrate it, because I knew it was my story as much as it was and is his, and we knew some of the parallels, but did not really know how deep it went. So that was it, man.
Appreciate that. Kevin, first time hearing the audiobook. Can you talk about your response? Can you talk about what you hope people who will now have access to the audiobook version will experience as they listen to the audiobook?
Dante, first of all, before we move the conversation much further, let me just pause and say thank you. I think, you know, the audience also deserves to know that you were also the lead researcher for the book. And so if people look in the reference and notes sections, they'll find really copious notes that help you understand clinically what was going on in my journey. And so I just want to acknowledge, you know, the outstanding work that you did and how you've been a part of this work for several years. And, you know, you birthed this baby with me. So let me just acknowledge that. And you know, Jeff, there's obviously a lot of things I could say about Jeff. He mentioned, you know, the things that we have in common. You know, but I will tell you, when you write a book, it's a really, the type of book I wrote, it's a very vulnerable experience. And so if you think of giving that responsibility over to someone to read it, that's really, it feels like a dangerous proposition, because you know, although you put your business out there, you want somebody to sort of read it as if you would read it with some care. And, you know, for example, one of the things in the book, it was really important to me to put, you know, I often say to put humanity on the bones of my father. And I think that Jeff did an outstanding story. But as Jeff alluded to, and this is, you know, one of the hopes of the book, is that my story is a personal story, but I also think it's a universal story. And I also think that that's why Jeff was able to connect so profoundly to my story, and, you know, and to read it as if it was his own.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for that. I just want to center that we're going to have a deeper conversation around grief, and especially grief during the holiday season. And I like to center grief in any topic with a definition so that we're on the same page. And the definition that resonated deeply with me around grief is that it is an acute natural pain in response to loss. Acute natural pain in response to loss. And so I want to first just open by acknowledging that grief is not only death, right? It's not only the death of a loved one, of a friend, of someone we deeply miss, but it's also the loss of routine, the loss of day-to-day activity, the loss of a rhythm that we typically would have in their presence. So I just want to center that as we have conversations around grief, we are speaking from a diverse perspective, not just loss of death. Transitioning just a little bit here. So I want to ask you both if you could speak to things that make the holiday particularly a challenging point of grief for you. And Kevin, you speak about that deeply in the book. and extremely vulnerable in that conversation. Can you sort of start there to tell us what it was like to go through the process of writing the book, and how do you manage grief during the
that's
holiday?
a great question. And, it's really one of the main reasons that we wanted to do this tonight, because I know that there are so many people who are like me, experienced the loss during the holiday season. And if they were particularly young in their development, like I was, and they didn't have the right tools to process their grief, it probably is sort of like a reoccurring cycle when the holiday cycle comes around. And certainly that was the case for me. And I write about it very vividly in the book. And that is the death of my father around Christmas time. And in fact, one of my friends asked me one time when the book first came out, she said, "Why did you write about the death of your father so much?" And I said, "Because it hurt so bad, right?" And the writing of it was therapeutic. But, for me, what I realized is that, all the way into my adulthood, and really for the majority of my life, to be just really honest with the audience, the holiday season was was a very iffy time for me. My mood swings I'd be happy, I'd be sad, I'd want to be around people, I wouldn't want to be around people. And all of that was related back to, losing my father around Christmas time. So, it's funny, like we love the Temptation song, right? Silent Night. I think that's like a classic in Black America. When I hear Silent Night, I think about sitting in the waiting room of a hospital in the ER room as a 10-year-old. And so, I think that there are a lot of people who've had a loss like that around the holiday season and didn't have the tools to deal with it. And so for me, I finally got the tools in working with a therapist several years ago. And one of the things that, he said to me is that the 10-year-old boy was still inside of me, and he needed and deserved answers, and he needed some time to process the death of his father. And, as a grown man at that point, stepping outside of myself and looking at the little boy who was still inside of me, Dontavius, that made a lot of sense. And so I then began to go through, what I think was a very therapeutic process of like processing that grief. And my therapist gave me some exercises to go through to get through that. And I actually, I'm not saying that those memories and that feeling of sadness doesn't come back, but I certainly am able to deal with it much differently now. And, that's one of the hopes that I hope that even this conversation, Dontavius, can help people do it. But there's also, I would just say, the larger goal of the book is to help people to understand how you move through processing pain, through processing trauma, to ultimately find your joy. And by the way, I got my joy jacket on this evening. So, that's what it's all about.
Thank you for that. One of the things that stuck out to me is you sharing, thank you for sharing, that the song Silent Night is for you in a way recalls a lot of traumatic experience around the time your father's passing. And I think the holiday times in general, there are a lot of nostalgic connections, if we will, to previous holiday seasons, to that time of the year, whether it be, the sense of the holiday, whether it be the smell of cinnamon or something, the snow, the weather, the Christmas music, the decorations, all of those bring up deep experiences of grief for many people during the holiday season. And so thank you for bringing voice to that. At this time, I want to pivot just a little bit to cover one of the many excerpts that we're going to share during this time from the book. Dr. Jeff is going to share the first excerpt, and then we're going to have him and Kevin kind of speak to what it was like bringing voice to that section of the book, and how it deeply resonated with the two of you.
You got to call on that something that your daddy used to tell you about, that power that can make a way out of no way. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Why Jesus Called a Man a Fool sermon, 1967. I was 10 years old. The year was 1986. I lived in Little Rock, Arkansas. There was snow on the ground. I remember the snow because it too was unlooked for. Little Rock rarely sees temperatures dip below freezing. When the cold comes, it seldom sticks around long enough to keep a snowscape from turning to mud. What I'm saying is that even if I had not buried my father under a skift of southern snow, I still would have remembered the white ground in Arkansas that year. Kids remember when the world looks like a Kodak moment, and they remember when their world fades to black.
Extremely powerful. And I think that speaks exactly to the trauma that we are reminded of during the holiday season perfectly. So the question that I want to ask to you, Kevin, is as you think about your journey on post-traumatic growth, and for the audience, post-traumatic growth is this level of deep personal growth, whether it be at a spiritual level, personal level, that comes as a result of a traumatic experience such as a death or a loss. What are some of the important moments, the pivotal moments that have facilitated that journey of post-traumatic growth for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question because, Dontavius, to be honest with you, the concept of post-traumatic growth actually just became real to me just a few years ago. And I actually write about this in my book as well, how if you have the right tools, you can experience post-traumatic growth. But if you don't have the right tools, it could be a downward spiral for you. And I would just say, I think for me, maybe I'll just go a couple steps back. The reflection that I even started to really process any of this came as a result of my depression. I think you could argue that all of sort of the pain and trauma of even the loss of my father was sort of in the background always. It's almost like you got, sort of like an infection that's there that needs to be treated, but, you can kind of live without it being treated. And I think that's how people, deal with trauma and pain. They think that they could just put it away and keep going and living, but little do we know it impacts our behaviors, our relationships, how we interact with people. And for me, when I experienced depression, as a part of my recovery, I really just started to do like deep internal reflective work, and I think there were exercises that I did to process the death of my father. So, for example, one exercise I did is I called people who had spent time with my father the last few days of his life, and I asked them what was on his mind, like what were the conversations he was having, what was he looking forward to, what was he worried about, was he happy? I was asking all these questions. I even talked to somebody. I was like, well, where did y'all go eat? What was going on? And so again, that the 10-year-old boy who lived inside of me needed those answers. And I do believe rather that was the beginning of what I consider, personal growth for me. And, I'm really incredibly grateful for that. And I think that the book for me, to bring it back full circle to the book, is really an invitation to others to do that deep internal reflective work.
Mm-hmm. In many ways, I know, Dr. Jeff, you and Kevin have a connection, deeper connection to the content of the book. Can you share a little bit about that and what resonates with you about Kevin's journey towards healing after the loss of his father?
I think,
as well?
My father passed when I was 10 years old as well. It was going into the Thanksgiving holiday, as opposed to, Christmas and Christmas season with Kevin. my father was Superman. In my mind, you know, he was the first black cop in my hometown, Magnolia, Arkansas, and you know, all of my friends thought, you know, he was, you know, just this dude. That was back when, you know, we was okay with cops, like in the hood specifically, for what he represented. So, you know, my father was a giant in my mind, and so understanding, being able to love and allow yourself to love flawed people, and recognize that we too are flawed. You know, my father was an alcoholic. And I think back as I got older and learned a lot about his life, I was like, okay, I understand, you know, some things that he went through. And I think the perspective and that journey that Kevin went on to try to get to understand who his father was a journey that he had to go on to understand who he is. And I understand that because that is exactly how I am. I love to talk to people that knew my father personally. I love it because it gives me some context. And, you know, I will say for me, in the terms of post-trauma growth, I've always lived feeling like I was chasing a ghost, the approval of a ghost, and being very hard on myself, specifically as it related to my father and what I thought he might think in a certain point, you know. And so that resonated with me. And then knowing Kevin personally, back before we were willing to have these types of vulnerable conversations, and it manifested itself how we were dealing with grief differently. That was just a bonding moment, you know.
Yeah. For both of you, it just sounds like the importance of honoring the legacy of your fathers, and in years to come, revisiting that was important in your journey towards healing. I have a follow-up question related to that. One of the ways that people process grief is to engage in deeper reflection about engage in processes where they honor during the holidays their loved ones who are no longer with them. Can you two share, to the degree that you're comfortable, what are some other ways you engage in that and remember the legacy of your father?
KD?
You want to take the first stop and I'll bring up the rear?
Okay. That's not what I wanted, but that's okay. I'll do it. Man, I see my father in my children, and the father and husband that I try to be, or who I imagine my father would have wanted me to be. And specifically as it relates to my children, the father that I wished I'd had. So as the holidays come around, I find myself, especially as my children get older, I find myself, you know, hanging on to the interactions with them, you know, because what I have learned is you cannot grieve silently, and you don't need to do it on a box, and just being willing to be open, and be openly emotional, allows my children to understand that strength has nothing to do with refusing choosing to cry. You know, my father passed. I cried for about 5 minutes, and I didn't cry again for 14 years. And I realize now, me being able to be emotional and still know that I'm the person my children come to when they need something or they need protection, being emotional, I know it allows my daughters to know they need to go get a man who's emotionally available. And it allows my sons to know that it's okay to be emotionally available. Doesn't have anything to do any effect on my strength. And so for me, these times, I don't take anything for granted in the moments. I tell my children I love you, you know, all the time. You know, my baby girl, who is my oldest daughter, she's my baby girl. She just got engaged Saturday. And yeah, man.
Congratulations.
Appreciate it. And it was super, super emotional. A lot of that, honestly, was just, you know, thinking about, man, did you make the right moves? And then you see her, and she's marrying a great dude. You know, he's a frat brother of mine. It's a real, you know, I can see some things in him that remind me of me, which she saw, you know. And so just watching these things, just getting more in touch as I grow older. I mean, you know, that's it.
Your positive modeling. Your positive modeling. That's the thing that's
Oh,
salient
I
for
hope
me.
so.
Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah, I'll build on that, Tavis.
What was that? I'm
say,
sorry.
you know, the first way, for me, it's more about telling my father's story. There was a time that I did not talk not only about my father sort of publicly, but I didn't even talk about him internally in my family. And so, you know, one of the things that I do around Christmas time, I tell my kids the story of my father. I tell them the story of his death. I tell them how fun he was, how much of a rebel he was. You know, to go back to the book, you know, Thurman talks about resistance. You know, like my father was not willing to comply. Like he resisted every norm of society that he could. He did it in how he wore his hair, how he dressed, how he talked. Like he completely resisted. And so, you know, I tell this story. I also have, you know, I have the very last thing that my father bought me, which was a cap gun. And he bought me this cap gun from 7-Eleven. And I put it in a frame, you know, several years ago, and put it in my son's room. Like it hangs in my son's room on the wall. And every Christmas morning, I kind of walk by and I look at that cap gun, and, you know, it just brings back the memories of walking down the street with him. And Jeff, he had this sway when he walked that, you know, I still haven't seen a sway like that. And if I saw it again, I'd be like, dude, walk like my daddy walked, you know? So, you know, just telling his story. And I think, you know, that's such a powerful thing for people who've experienced that kind of loss, is to like tell their stories aloud, you know. And even when people who had, you know, very complicated lives, like, you know, Jeff's father did. My father had a very complicated life. He died from a cocaine-induced brain aneurysm, right? But what I now understand, and I think Jeff alluded to this earlier, that most addiction is related to unresolved trauma. And so when you see people who like to escape into a wonderland, they're actually escaping some form of pain. And so in that way, when I think about that, I feel really sorry for my father. I feel sorry for a man who didn't have the opportunity to do as I have done, right, and process his pain and process his trauma, and ultimately to, you know, find his path to joy. So, you know, that I think, you know, is really part of like my journey, but I think it's a journey that I guess what I'm trying to say is I want so many other people to do that work, because I don't think that like real joy is happy. It is possible, rather, when you got that infection in the background, like I was talking about earlier. You have to do this work, and it's hard. And I'm going to step further, Dontavius, because you're a therapist. I'm not a therapist. It's a full disclaimer. But obviously, I spend a lot of time with therapists, as you know. some of what we have experienced may be too painful for us to process alone. So I just want to be careful to say that I'm not saying to folks that they need to go do a deep dive and do what I did, thinking that it will get them there, that, you know, their experiences may require them to have a therapist or a good friend holding their hand through that process.
Thank you for leveraging that, Kevin. And to acknowledging that grief is very complex, right? And you don't reach a stage, it's a one resolve, right? That we constantly flow through stages of grief. And so to that point, being cognizant of time as well, can you two speak to some of the personal signs that you need to engage in deeper healing around your grief? What does that look like for you? And before you address it, it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge Stephen Twitch Boss dying by suicide recently. And I think this evokes a deeper conversation around this awareness of where we are mentally. And when do we know we need to engage in a deeper journey in our own healing? And so I just want to center that and invite you all to just share what are some personal signs that you need to go deeper into the healing journey, whether it be therapy, whether it be connecting with loved ones, whether it be honoring your fathers or other loved ones in the ways that you mentioned earlier.
Well, I know for me, I'm an extrovert, and I like people. I always want to be around people. My mother's only child. I'm the only child my father had in wedlock. And so I love being in the dorm, being in the frat house. And you know, I wanted people around me. When I start feeling myself wanting to turn in, then that's when I realized I gotta change something up, you know. Excuse me. I was about 4 or 5 years ago, you know, Kevin and I were texting. It was Christmas time, and we were texting. And he finally said, man, you got a minute? Let me call you. And I did. And I was feeling something. And I didn't want to go with my wife and her family. We were visiting them and the kids, so they just went, and I stayed in the hotel room by myself, you know. And I don't know when the last time KD and I talked, you know. And he called me, man. We talked for 4.5 hours. And we needed that, right? Like, we needed that interaction because of the moment, you know. And hindsight now is obvious what it was for both of us. We didn't touch on it. We didn't have no conversation like this. You know, it was just two brothers, you know, being there for each other. So that's for me. If I start feeling myself want to move inward, then I know, okay, I need to step out. I need to get to talk to somebody. I might call my LB, you know, who is my best friend, Corey. It is what it is, you know, those people, you know. So that's what it is for me.
Thank you for sharing that. I see a lot of people that resonates with a lot of people and who are in the comment section.
You know,
Kevin?
I like Jeff. I really can't pinpoint. You know, and I always say for me, Dontavius, and it's kind of difficult to admit this, but I think all of this sort of pain for me had been in the background until I experienced depression. And then when, like, my depression brought me to my knees, and it literally was like, okay, I got to take an inventory of my life completely. That means I was assessing every relationship. I was assessing how I showed up in the relationships, how people treated me, how I treated them. And I think it was just a natural part of that I started to think about, well, what things impacted me that I haven't quite dealt with. right? And so, I'd like to think that there were signs. I want to be clear, like when the holiday season would come along, and I'd have folks over, and I'd be very excited to have them. And then I was like, look, I'd be glad when these folks leave. Like, I want these folks out of my house. Like, it would literally be like that. Like, it'd be that quick. And so those were some of the signs that, that there was something that wasn't right. Or even, like through the years, even in relationships, and not just like a marriage, or my marriage, or even, just even in my friendships, like my unwillingness to be vulnerable, to allow people to get too close to me. Like, to see the 10-year-old in me was still scared of losing people that he loved. So what does that mean? I want to love as few people as possible, right? Because the more people I love, the more likely it is that somebody might leave me and hurt me. Like, that was the 10-year-old in me. So that means, like, look, I'm treating you with a long spoon. I'm only letting you in if I really got to let you in. Like, you might think that you're in, but you were not in. But that type of love and that type of relationship gives you a half relationship every time. People don't get the best of you, right? And you're not going to get the best of them because you're giving half into relationships. So, for me, maybe I can't say decisively like Jeff was able to say, but I do see those inflection points of how I was showing up over the years. And, those are some keys to, like, what was in the background. There's almost like, if you think about a computer, and maybe this is a good way, Duntavius, to think about trauma and pain. You think about a computer that's running, but it has a virus, right? And the computer is performing, but it's performing sluggish and slow, and it doesn't process very quickly, right? And if you're not careful, guess what? If you don't know any better, you'll think that computer's performing okay, right? But then when you run a check on it and you realize that, okay, I got a virus, and you get the virus off, it performs, like majorly improved. Then you're like, oh, wow. And that's what I feel like happened to me.
Yeah. And that's the journey that you highlight in the book, Kevin. And I just want to highlight you, Kevin, you said that you don't see some of the trends, but I think throughout the book, you kind of highlight those. And we got a name that they shift as we grow, as we evolve, as we're at different stages in our life developmentally. We experience grief in different ways, right? And so I just want to acknowledge that it's important to be aware of some personal signs that we might need to engage in some deeper healing. And I agree. That was a wonderful analogy, Kevin. Thank you for sharing that. So we are closer to where we want to transition towards the end of this deep conversation, which I appreciate the wisdom that you two have imparted upon us and just sharing about your journey towards healing. I just want to end by saying that if anyone is experiencing deep psychological pain right now or needs to engage in their own journey towards healing, 988 is a resource that you can reach out to if you are experiencing a crisis. And if you or a loved one is looking for therapeutic services, culturally intentional therapeutic services, where you feel seen, heard, and understood, Hurdle Health is a platform that I think you will find deeply beneficial in your journey in healing. And so I invite you to visit hurdle.health if you are interested in therapy, or if you or a loved one is interested. And I also want to announce that the audiobook version of The Joy of the Disinherited is available at audible.com. And so you can just search The Joy of the Disinherited, and you can find it on multiple platforms, but Audible certainly is a place to access. So I'm going to turn over to Kevin with some closing remarks. And I just want to thank you all for deep engagement in the chat, and to Jeff and Kevin for your vulnerability and deep reflection on your own personal journey towards healing
Yeah, so
through
we're
loss.
Duntavius and Jeff. Just check-wise, we're going to get cut off at 8:30 exactly, right? Is that the case? We don't have time to take questions from the audience.
It should cut off at
Let's try to
8:30.
see if
That's
we
my
can get if
understanding.
there are any questions from the audience. If anybody wants to try to join us live and ask a question, maybe we have time for one question for sure, maybe two. But let's just see if anybody wants to join live here and ask a question of us. Any takers out there?
Okay.
Let me know if you all see someone trying to join us live. And while we're doing this, I just also want to announce if people, the first 5 people rather, to DM me a copy of the receipt from the audio that they bought the audio book, I will send them a hardback autographed copy of the book. So the first 5 people who send me a receipt showing that they purchased the audio book or a screen of them listening to the audio book, a screenshot, I will send them in the mail a hard copy of the book.
It's dope.
It's a wonderful gift. And by the way, the book is on Amazon Prime. So in most places you'll get it in like 2 days or less, you know. Doesn't look like we have any questions from the audience.
There's one
about how do I let them in?
Yeah, it's like name some triggers in the holidays. You talked about Silent Night. I would tell you one that's interesting for me. The Christmas episode of Sanford and Son. I won't watch it. It was one of the last. My father and I used to love to watch Sanford and Son, and it was one of the last Sanford and Son episodes that I watched with my father before he passed. And it's the one where it's like the ghost of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas future, and Fred, and it's crazy. And my LB Boosie is a Sanford and Son connoisseur as well. But I won't watch that episode. It's rough for me because I can't watch the episode without thinking about, you know, it's one of the last, you know, things that I happen to do with my father. And that's weird to me. But yeah, that's a trigger.
Yeah, Duntavius, why don't you just, you know, very briefly talk about like how senses, sounds, smells, and so forth are triggers?
Yeah, I can speak to the fact that our neurology, our brain works in very mysterious ways. Sense and sensory are a deep connector to traumatic experiences. All of our senses, and so anything. There's a lot of research around PTSD and trauma. People avoiding significant places, events. Certain smells remind them of traumatic experiences. Seeing pictures. All of these can be sort of catalysts or triggers that evoke the same, if not more intense, feelings of grief and loss that we experience at the time of losing a loved one or experiencing any traumatic experience. And if I may, I show one personal one for me, especially during the holidays. We spend a lot more time with loved ones. And so we're eating, we're seeing people we haven't seen in years. And so just seeing someone who resembles a loved one that you've lost can be a trigger as well. I know that for many of my family members, I deeply resemble my grandfather. And so when they see me, oh, wow, you look just like Roy. And so that's a trigger for them. And so I just want to bring voice to that too. That makes the holidays uniquely challenging for a lot of people. And the food and just tasting someone's favorite dish. If someone makes the dish in the same way a loved one made it, all of those are sort of reminders of your grief. So
My
thank you
mother,
for that question.
my mother has told me recently that sometimes she can't look at me. Um, I'll say something or I'll hold my mouth a certain way, and she says she'll just have chills. And my parents divorced when I was 3, but they were close. And my father would tell me all the time it was his fault, and that I'm the only child my father had in wedlock. And my mother, she would say I'll move my mouth or say something, and she would just get chills. And sometimes she would just stop mid sentence and just get up and walk away.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jeff. Looks like we're right at time. Duntavius and Jeff, Duntavius, I want to thank you for moderating the conversation and bringing the professional expertise that you bring. I'm so grateful for the work that you do. And Jeff, I want to thank you too. Your friendship means the world to me. Looks like there's one question somebody's sneaking in at the last minute. Can you all provide or describe some practical coping skills, ideas, skills that we can consider incorporating to self-care? Duntavius, would you take that really quickly? We probably got about 7 minutes before we get cut off here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. A lot come to mind. I think the first one is acknowledging, like Kevin and Jeff shared, some of the signs that you are experiencing a deeper level of pain or hurt, whether that be the holiday season or year round. Self-care, another piece of deep therapeutic healing is creating, especially for Black people, right? Creating, whether it be music, writing a book, engaging in any sort of artistic expression. Those are deeply healing and therapeutic processes that I think we know that they're healing for us, but when you think about the ability to create something and how you engage different areas of your brain, like how you are mindful and intentional about which parts of your body you utilize when you create art and music, and it is a skill that goes undervalued. But I also would like to add that therapy is, and I'm saying this as a therapist, obviously, but therapy, when you are met with a therapist who acknowledges your culture, understands you, sees you, and is intentional about their work with you, that is a process of healing that you can't put value to.
Duntavius, what is work? I want to share. Like, I don't even know how I wrote a book. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd say a prayer, I'd ask God to meet me, and when I was done, I had all of these words on paper. But there were times that as I was writing, like I was literally crying myself through the writing. Like it was that much pouring out on the paper. And I don't know that the man I am today, or the man that I think I am, how I'm showing up, that I could be that person had I not wrote my book. That book was core to my writing. I'm not suggesting that everybody has to write a book, but I do think that there's something to what you're saying about finding a way to let the pain out, to let the trauma out. Like you have to do that. You cannot let that virus run in the background of the computer. Like you can't do it. We're really, you guys, we're at 4 minutes now. This has been like, I feel like we could keep going here. It's been so rich. And, the ultimate invitation, folks, is that we want all of you all to go on this journey of deep self-reflection, to realize that, it is a journey that you don't have to take alone. Therapy is an option for people, finding another creative outlet. But the important thing is that you do the work, and that's a path to real joy. That's why it comes back full circle, Duntavius, the joy of the disinherited. There is still joy possible. Last words, Duntavius or Jeff?
No, man. Good. Appreciate it.
I just want to emphasize another part of healing is really learning through someone else's journey and being inspired by their bravery, their vulnerability. And I think that's what the Joy of the Disinherited will offer many people. And I'm excited that the audiobook version gives more people access to experience your journey and your healing, Kevin. So I want to conclude with saying that. I want to say I appreciate you two gentlemen again for the deep conversation, the vulnerability, and centering the importance of mental health, not only during the holidays, but broadly, year-round, 365
Yeah, and
elevation
don't
model.
forget, for the first 5 people who DM me their receipt of the audiobook or screenshot that you're listening to the book, I will send you a hard copy, autographed copy of the book. So DM me either on Messenger or even on Instagram, and I will get that to you. All right. Thank you all.
No doubt.
Peace.